Hi everybody, welcome back to Mando Lessons. My name is Baron Collins Hill. If you're a regular around here, you may have noticed this is a new space. I've recently moved out to Portland, Oregon, and I'm working on setting up a new space to record my videos in. And while I was setting up, I was starting to think, the more time you spend with an instrument or in a studio, in my case, the more you really get to know what makes things sound the best and look the best. So I'm working with cameras and lights and a different space and sound and the same old instrument, but I figured I would talk a little bit about how to really get the best sound out of your mandolin and the process to do that. So we're going to talk about how to get your mandolin to sound from maybe something like this to something like this. So, to me, those are very different sounds. If you were watching closely, you might have noticed that I changed picks in the middle there. I went from a thin pick to a thick pick, but that was really only one of many parts of what I changed. I changed my technique, I changed my arm placement, I changed how fluid I was feeling, how locked up my right and left hands were, the position of the instrument on my body, the pick. All sorts of things changed, not just the pick. And I want to talk a little bit about ways to slowly get the sound that you hear in your mind as your ideal tone and your ideal kind of physical feeling when you play the instrument, and how to approach that. It's a process that takes time. It takes months. It's not going to happen overnight. But with some of these ideas, I hope I can help you make your mandolin playing sound its best and feel its best. One of the first things you can do is start to give descriptive qualities and names to the sounds that you're hearing and to the sounds that you want to be hearing. So I started out and my playing sounded somewhat like this. Which I would call a little bit shrill, very picky for lack of a better word, trebly, a little sharp sounding. Doesn't matter what descriptive words you use as long as they make sense to you. And then the sound that I ended up with, which is my normal playing sound, sounds like this. Which I would call a little more bassy, a little more well-rounded, a little smoother sounding. And so sort of moving from, to me, I don't prefer that sort of sharper sound, especially on this instrument. And so over the years, I've changed my pick and my playing technique and the strings I use and all the different variables to sort of approach the sound that I'm looking for. Now, before you go out and buy a bunch of different gear that's going to get you the sound you're looking for, you can make a very similar sound to this orange pick. So, like this. And now I'm going to use the brown pick and get a fairly similar sound. And likewise, you can get, for the sound that you're going for, in this case, I'm looking for that rounder sound. You can get a lot of that sound from a thin pick. So it's not just about the gear, it's not just about the strings. A lot of that is coming from technique. So one thing that I was doing here is when I started out with the tone I don't prefer, I had the thin pick, but I also had the mandolin kind of straight on, which sort of locks up this left shoulder. If you're unfamiliar with good sort of posture and technique, check out my beginners series where I talk about a lot of sort of the fundamental mechanics of getting to play the instrument and getting a good tone out of it. So, but briefly, I I was using what I would refer to as improper technique. I was kind of stiffened up. My mandolin was placed in a way that really, I think, leads to not a great attack of the instrument with your right arm. And I think you'll get a little bit more pick sound because the neck of the instrument isn't tipped. So all of these variables change over time. There's a lot of them, but if you just kind of work through and see what each variable does, you can slowly develop your own sound. So right now I was thinking, okay, that sounds a little like you're getting a lot of pick noise. Again, I'm back to the thick pick. I'll just stick with that to get that variable out of the way. So a lot of pick noise. Let's see if I can get rid of some of that by moving the neck of the instrument. It's a little bit better. I'm still pretty tight though because my left shoulder is pulled back and my right elbow is pulled forward. So I've got the angle now, which gets rid of some of that pick noise. Improves the tone a little bit, but a lot of tone is going to be improved, I think, by loosening up a little bit. So we're going to work on getting that nice kind of angle to the instrument. The neck gets pushed forward a little bit, the body gets pushed back, and you become much more natural because your shoulders are now in a more neutral position. Versus again, back to a relaxed position. This isn't a perfect test because the microphone is in a constant spot. It's not moving with the instrument, so that's going to adjust what you're hearing. But when you're not playing into a microphone and you're just listening to yourself, often people will sound better when you're more relaxed. All right, so now we've got the neck of the mandolin tipped a little bit. We've got the neck pushed out a little bit to give ourselves a little more space. We're still getting a little bit of that pick sound, though. A little brighter than I'd like to hear. And if you look at where my right hand is, it's pretty close to the bridge. As you can see here, I've kind of been playing right in this zone. And I can get rid of some of that sort of harsher sound by moving my hand up towards the fingerboard or the nut or the tuning machines and away from the bridge, and that will and now combine that with, I was not really sitting in my best posture, work on some of that posture there, sounding much more rounded and fuller sounding to my ears versus so you really have to work on these variables one at a time. So maybe you've gotten yourself to a point where you're feeling good about where the neck of the instrument is, where you're picking on the fretboard, how everything's coming out, how your hand feels going through the strings, and you've got a sound that maybe sounds like this. And then you say, okay, it's still a little picky. So right then, using the orange pick, at that point, you can change that single variable. So everything else is the same. You've got a good technique. Everything is in line. And now it's time to start changing picks. So that was the thin pick. This is the 0.6 millimeter. And then we've got a 1.1. And then we've got the larger shape, the big triangle, and a 1.5. We're really into the realm of personal preference at this point. If you like that sort of more trebly sound, that's totally great. And you can go for a thinner pick. I personally like the warmth I get out of a thicker pick, so I'm going to stick with that. But we're not changing a lot of variables at this point. We've got everything else lined up. And it's time to start thinking about what your pick's made out of, how thick it is, what shape it is, all that sort of stuff. Now that your posture and a lot of the other variables are worked out. From there, other things you can think about are what kind of strings you're using, whether or not you're using things like an armrest or a tone guard, which is a little cage that goes on the back of the instrument, holds it off your stomach a little bit. whether you have string dampeners, which I have videos about many of those things, and that's sort of getting into the gear side of things, different bridge material, nut material. I think those things will change your sound a little bit, but the biggest thing you can do is really work on technique, finding that general technique that's going to make you play comfortably and smoothly and get the general sound that you want. Then the next biggest thing, in my opinion, is pick thickness and material and shape. And the shape is really more of like a comfort thing, and the material has a little bit of effect on the sound, and the thickness, I think, has the most effect on the sound. And then from there, you can work on string gauges, and you kind of get a law of diminishing returns going on of how much all these things are really changing. Again, this is just my 2 cents. If you have strong opinions about what you like to hear, that's totally up to you. And I've just been thinking a lot about that, as both I learn to play mandolin more, I work on other instruments and sort of try to develop proper techniques and good tone fundamentals on those instruments. And as I set up, a new recording studio. So hopefully, I'm in a new space. I can hear it's a little echoey. I haven't got all my lighting figured out. So hopefully, as you watch along and catch me every week, hopefully these videos, the quality will be improving. And that's sort of one of the things I'm thinking about, and how correlating that to good tone. I hope you found that helpful. I put out new lessons every single week. They're always free. You can support me a couple ways if you like these lessons. There's a PayPal link in the description, or you can check out my Patreon page, also in the description. The description will have everything you're looking for. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.